Thanks so much for joining us today. So the year is 1812, and we're talking about Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry. He was the governor of Massachusetts, he was a founding father, and he was later the vice president of the United States under James Madison. But what you need to know about this story is that Governor Gerry had to sign a redistricting map back in 1812 when he was governor of Massachusetts. And when he was governor, he wanted to sign a specific map that would draw his state Senate districts in a way that would help his Democratic Republican Party. And, you know, it's not like it was totally out of the realm of possibility. I mean, when you have a governor or a state legislature overseeing a process like that at the time, people were like, okay, this is a minor oversight that I guess we did think about. It was unheard of at the time, though. People actually had not done such a thing, but Governor Gerry did try to draw those districts in a manner that supported his party, the state Senate districts, and gained that electoral advantage over the Federalist Party. Now, one district was so bizarrely shaped, and it's on your screen right now. It was winding and twisting and going in every weird possible way in a manner that it looked like a salamander. It's the weirdest, strangest shape you'll ever see. So Political Cartoon and the Boston Gazette took aim at these strangely drawn districts and these weird, misshapen districts that are clearly designed to cheat in a way. And this specific salamander-looking district combined the word Gerry and salamander, and the word came to be gerrymander. And that is the word that it's this idea that Governor Gerry drew this salamander-shaped map and ended to pick his own voters. And so the Boston Gazette coined the gerrymander term, combining Gerry and salamander. So Governor Gerry didn't draw the maps himself. Obviously, I don't think governors usually are drawing these maps, but Governor Gerry didn't draw this map himself. But he reportedly didn't like the idea. He didn't like the idea, to his credit. He wasn't a fan of it. But the name still caught on. The name gerrymander caught on. And so now the guy's legacy, I guess, is the creator of the gerrymander. And now for my friends who don't know what gerrymandering is, or don't have a very clear idea of what gerrymandering is, it's basically what I described Governor Gerry doing. He was drawing his districts in a way that would benefit him. And what that means is basically, I mean, people I don't think quite get what that actually means. Like, how can you draw a district to benefit yourself? There are certain groups that you might expect to more reliably vote for you or reliably vote for the other side. When you're gerrymandering, you might draw those districts in a manner that you draw in a certain way to pack all the people from the opposing party into one district so that they can only have influence in that single district, and you may have way more surrounding them. Or you might try to expand in a way that you spread them all out. You spread out all of the other side into different districts so that they cannot consolidate their support, and so they completely have no representation. It's these little weird, shady ways that politicians use to pick their own voters, which I think across the board is just terrible. It should not be happening. It's a disgusting thing that gerrymandering is, and I think it's wrong. And it happens, I'm not one to always say that it happens on both sides in this manner, but hey, gerrymandering is one of those things that happens on both sides, and it's not good. It's not good, and it needs to be stopped. Now, some states have independent redrawing commissions that take two Democrats, two Republicans, and and an independent, and they come together and they draw the districts. Some states have legislatures that draw them with some sort of guardrails in place. So like there are solutions, but in general, we still have a really big gerrymandering problem in this state. And it results in some of the weirdest shaped districts ever. But that's just the reality of where we are. And my interview with Kelda Roys today, it's a great interview with a lot of interesting things. But one of the things we talked about was the fair maps in Wisconsin and how Republicans were gerrymandering the state in such a horrific way in Wisconsin that it became difficult for Democrats to succeed. Even though they were getting 50% of support in the state, they were winning all the statewide offices, but they could not win control of the legislature or the congressional maps. And it was because the districts were drawn in such a weird, cheatful way that people couldn't get the adequate representation that they deserved. So that brings us to Texas. As you might know, and I've talked about it here on the show, and it's also in my interviews this week as well, Texas has done a lot of weird, shady map drawing in the past few weeks. It all started in June of this year when President Trump pushed for Texas to redraw maps to preserve control of the U.S. House. President Trump straight up just said that he wanted 5 more seats in the House of Representatives, and he thought that Texas could get him those 5 additional House seats. Now, why did President Trump think of doing this effort? Well, 2 things we need to point out. First, this is a mid-decade effort. House districts are only redrawn usually at the beginning of the decade when the census provides new apportionment data, which means that some states will lose representation, some states will gain some. And so because of that, you have to redraw the districts to accommodate the loss or gain of seats. And that usually happens at the beginning of the decade. Texas is trying to do that in the middle of the decade. Now, why exactly Texas is trying to do this in the middle of the decade is because I think it's pretty clear, the writing is on the wall, next year's midterms are about to be pretty devastating for Republicans. It's going to be terrible because their policies suck. They are hurting the American people, and the American people are accordingly showing their dissatisfaction with their poor governance. And that comes in the forecasts that show that Republicans are not set to do very well in next year's midterms. And so in order to cushion the blow of this pretty devastating election that's I'm sure about to come next year, Republicans are now trying to cheat. Now they're trying to cheat and they're trying to, lie their way through this. And now they want to basically get their way and redraw the map so that they can get the 5 extra seats so that they can somewhat cushion the potential victory of Democrats who are trying in an honest way to win the votes of these people, of the American people. It's a really dishonest and shameful, they're shameless, but it's a shameful effort on Republicans' part, and it's setting up a very dangerous road. But that's the first part. That's the first part that we have, that they're trying to redraw the districts, and the districts would essentially put Democratic seats to be extinct, or it would force Democratic incumbents to run against each other. So in general, it is trying to decimate Democrats' effort in the state of Texas. Again, blatant cheating. It's obviously a political process. They can obviously do it. But just because you can do something doesn't make it right. It's a horrific effort. And a lot of people love to criticize me. They love to say, but Democrats gerrymander too. Democrats do gerrymander. And it's not good that they gerrymander. In the states that they gerrymander, they shouldn't be gerrymandering. But, and I say this, but, Republicans are gerrymandering in the middle of the year, so blatantly trying to change their seats right before an election because they know they're going to lose, and they want to make sure that they are essentially conceding that they are a losing party. And so they want to make sure they can cushion. Don't you hate it when your camera cuts out mid-rant? Basically, Texas Republicans, long story short, are cheating. They are cheating. And so Governor Greg Abbott called a special session of the legislature to draw these maps. And they drew the maps, they got the maps. In the past few weeks, they showed the maps, and the maps were exactly what we thought. They were basically redrawing to cheat. And it does a lot of things. Like, it basically reconfigured districts in a manner where Austin, Dallas and Fort Worth, Houston, and South Texas would likely flip seats or force blue incumbents into primaries. So Texas Democrats decided to take matters into their own hands. They decided that it was not worth just sitting by and just watching. So what they did is basically, in order to conduct business in a legislature, you need a thing called a quorum. And that means a requisite number of members present to get any business done. And Republicans don't have that on their own. They need some Democrats to be there. But the Democratic caucus on August 3rd, over 50 House Democrats in Texas fled the state. They just left the state, went to places like New York and Massachusetts, but they came primarily here, where I am right now, to Illinois, for basically refuge from the threat, because they don't want to be in quorum. And the Texas state officials said that Governor Abbott and Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, said they would arrest people in the state if they did not come. So they came here to Illinois and New York and Massachusetts to evade the threat of their arrest, because Texas officials now believe in arresting the opposition for doing what is a completely legal and political thing. It's an actual political tactic, and there's a long history actually in Texas of using the quorum break to get stuff done. So it's a clear thing that they were trying to do, but now Texas officials want to use the power of the government to go after their opposition and arrest them, to expel them. And I'll talk about the expulsion effort. But Governor J.B. Pritzker has pledged his support, has been providing that sort of protection here in Illinois. Governor Abbott said that he's going to send Texas Rangers to Illinois. Governor Abbott, keep yourself out of my state. Keep yourself out of Illinois. You do not belong here. Stay out. You cannot bring your people here. And we are going to defend democracy in Illinois as much as we possibly can. And that means preventing you from sending your law enforcement into a state where you can't even enforce your law enforcement. So stay out of Illinois. But there was this effort. So they are charged about $500 a day at most $500 a day to be doing this thing. So Democrats raised money in the week before to make sure that they can cover these costs, because it's expensive. So they raised money. Now, Texas state officials are alleging that this is bribery. So now the Attorney General has issued some non-binding opinions that threaten bribery charges and arrests of these people, of these Texas Democrats, for what? For fundraising? Because Donald Trump is able to fundraise and use that money to pay for his legal bills where he has been convicted, but Texas Democrats cannot pay for fines that are being imposed on them for doing their job. It's a really weird thing that these people deal with. Treat everyone on the same standard. They're not gonna, but you can at least ask. And now Governor Abbott is trying to do something that is so despot and dictatorial in just such a weird way. Jean Wu is the House Democratic Caucus leader, basically the leader of the House Democrats. Governor Abbott is trying to now expel him from his seat. He's trying to remove him from his seat in the legislature over this whole thing. Yeah, Governor Abbott is now trying to remove his opposition from their political seats. This is what happens in third world countries. This is what happens in countries like Russia and North Korea. In fact, actually it doesn't happen in North Korea because that already happened and now they're the way they are. But this happens in places like Russia. This happens in authoritarian countries where you expel members of the opposition party for using the very few political tactics that they have at their disposal to stand up. Now, the legality of this power is really debated. It's been taken to the Texas Supreme Court. There's a lot of debate on whether this is even possible, if Governor Abbott even has this authority to expel people from the legislature. The seat doesn't belong to Governor Abbott, and it doesn't belong to Jean Wu for that matter. It belongs to the people of Texas, and I think only the people of Texas are able to decide who sits in that seat. And they most recently decided that Jean Wu should be sitting in that seat. And so that's why he's there. And that's why he's exercising his political authority as the opposition leader in Texas, but also just as a member of the legislature to stand up to this madness that they are imposing. I talked about some of the threats for, from blue states to combat this. California already has a pretty full-blown plan to do this. Governor J.B. Pritzker last night on Stephen Colbert's show expressed interest in maybe redrawing districts in Illinois. I don't know how much more you can do with that in Illinois, but they are thinking of it. It's a dangerous game, I think, to be going down such a path. I don't think it's going to be great that states are in an arms race for congressional seats. It's call it an arms race because that's what it is. I don't think it's great that we're going down this path. We really need to hold ourselves to be true in this moment, to stand up. Republicans are falling by the graces, showing their true colors, showing what they believe. They think their voters don't notice. People notice. People know what's going on. I talk to a lot of people every day about this stuff, and I'm telling you, everyday people are keeping track. People know what's going on. And it's a shame, it's a travesty, and it's horrific that they are trying to cheat. Democrats have to stand up in the way they best can. And if that means that they are standing up by evading Texas, if it means that they have to do this by counteracting stuff with their own redistricting, because Republicans in Texas pulled the gloves off. So Democrats, whatever they do now is in response to what Texas Republicans are doing. Not to say it's a tit for tat type of thing, but that is, let's be honest, that is what it is. It's a tit for tat thing at this point because we have to make sure that our democracy prevails. And that means Democrats have to do what they have to do. But of course, I'm going to be keeping track of all of this. My interview, I got to talk with Kelda Roys about some of this as well. And I have an interview coming up next week that you don't want to miss. It involves someone from Texas as well. So stay tuned for that. I have an interview coming up right now with Kelda Roys, as I've said a few times in today's episode. Please tune into that episode. It's a great episode. I had a great conversation with her, and she made a pretty exciting announcement on the show as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you on the other side for that interview. Sometimes I like to say Wisconsin is the center of the political universe. I work out of Wisconsin for a lot of the year, so a lot of folks probably know that a lot of eyes are always on Wisconsin. And a lot has been going on in the state as well in the past few weeks, from the budget they just passed to Governor Tony Evers announcing he's not running for a third term. My next guest is someone who's an active leader in state politics in Wisconsin and has been making a difference for many years out there. And she has some incredible insights into what goes on in the state. And I'm so excited to have her on today for an interview. So joining us today to talk about the headlines, Wisconsin politics, and a lot more, I'm joined by State Senator Kelda Roys. Senator Roys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Ishan S. Show today.
It's so good to be with you, Ishan.
It's great to have you on. So before we get into our interview today, why don't you take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. Well, I'm a state senator in Wisconsin, and I sit on the powerful Joint Finance Committee, which is the committee that is in charge of writing the state budget. In addition, I'm a small business owner. I'm an attorney by training and a graduate of UW Law School, so also a proud Badger. As I mentioned, I run my own small business, but I also served as executive director of NARAL Pro-Choice Wisconsin. So although I've served in state government for about 10 years, I've spent the majority of my career in the private sector. I'm also a mom. I have 2 young adult stepdaughters and 3 little ones at home. I'm very, very interested in policies that are pro-family. I've been politically active basically my whole life because I think it's really, really important to use the luck that I've had and the gifts that I've been given as a child growing up in Wisconsin to pay it forward for the next generation so that kids growing up now will have those same opportunities and hopefully even more.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, you have quite the resume that, I mean, we would have to spend the entire episode talking about, but you've done a lot of great work. Now you talk about your work on the budget committee. Wisconsin just passed a pretty big deal budget, a lot of negotiating that went into it. Could you tell us a little bit about the budget, what's in it, any concessions that were made, any negotiations that were made with Republicans, because it is a Republican-controlled legislature right now. Could you walk us through that?
For a little while longer. So, Wisconsin has been heavily gerrymandered for 15 years. I and many others worked very, very hard to flip the Supreme Court and get new fairer maps, which have now been in play for only one election cycle. That brought our margins much closer. So it's important to sort of set that context that we've had overwhelmingly Republican budgets for a whole generation. And so when I talk about the underinvestments that have been made in this current budget, you need to understand that's not a one-time thing, right? This is compounded over time when you starve, for instance, our public schools or our university system of money. It's not just a short-term harm, it's continuing a long-term pattern.
Right.
And so when, furnaces don't get replaced, or you can't buy new textbooks, or teachers retire and you can't hire new ones, right? Those effects compound over time. Overall, in this budget, it is a Republican budget. Governor Evers is a great Democratic governor. He writes a really good, thoughtful, balanced budget every single year, and then the Republicans promptly take it and throw it in the garbage. That's what happened this time as well. And with the budget that they throw into the garbage, they also disregard the testimony and the context that we've received from thousands of Wisconsinites in every single corner of the state. I have traveled around the state for years listening to people, and overwhelmingly what they say is, we want our kids to have great schools. We want our public schools funded. We want access to affordable health care. We want our local governments to be able to afford to have good, high quality public services. And those priorities, unfortunately, were ignored by the Republican majority. So while this budget does allow Wisconsin to limp along for another 2 years, and it does have a couple of good things in it, as every single budget does. There's always a couple, sprinkles on the top. Overwhelmingly, this budget fails to provide the investment that especially our kids need and deserve. And that's for K-12 public education, but that's also for early childhood. And it's also for access to higher ed. And I mean, our technical colleges, vocational training, as well as the University of Wisconsin system.
But compared, and I think any progress in the budget that you guys were able to pass is miles better than what we saw in Washington with the Republican Party's flagship big, ugly bill that they passed a few weeks ago. I've been talking to state leaders here in Illinois. We just had Speaker Chris Welsh on, and he was talking about the huge concerns for state spending that Illinois is going to face, for example. I want to get some of your insights as a Wisconsin state legislature. What worries you about the big ugly bill as it affects Wisconsinites, as well as just the state of Wisconsin in general? Because I know that there is a lot to be worried about.
Yeah, this federal budget bill is nothing short of an attack on states. And the impact that it's going to have on Wisconsin families and communities is going to be devastating. And unfortunately, it's not all going to happen immediately, right? They were very strategic about pushing out some of the worst impacts until after the midterm elections. This is all about taking money from working people and from the middle class and from the poor, taking away healthcare access, taking away insurance coverage, taking away food, literally food out of the mouths of children, to give tax breaks to billionaires, and blowing a massive hole in our deficit. I mean, this is going to add something like $5 trillion to our national debt, which is just, it's hard to wrap your head around how much money that is.
Yeah.
And it does so not by investing in things that are actually going to help grow our economy, help families be successful, lower costs. In fact, it does the opposite of all these things. It disinvests in education. It cuts services off that families need at the knees. And it's a very, very dangerous piece of legislation that is going to have a devastating impact when you think about hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites losing their health insurance coverage over the next decade.
But I do want to ask you, it wouldn't be an Isha on a show interview if we didn't hit some of the headlines. And there is a really big thing going on out in Texas. Speaking of power grabs, Republicans in Texas, for friends who don't know, are basically redrawing their congressional maps in the middle of the decade which doesn't happen, in an effort to, what I like to say, cheat in the midterms. They want to redraw the districts to pick their own voters so that they can cushion the loss that I feel like they know is coming next year. What has happened is, in order to prevent a quorum or prevent business from happening in the state legislature in Texas, Texas Democrats have fled the state and have come to states like Illinois right here, New York, and Massachusetts. Senator Roys, when you look at what this, let's call it, attack on our democracy is going on in Texas, how do you react to this? Because I know Wisconsin also has a very contentious congressional map discussion that I guess has been addressed, and thankfully, but with that experience as a leader in a state that had some issues in that nature, I don't think maybe as full-blown as Texas, but I think with some experience, what is your reaction to everything that we're seeing right now out of that state?
Well, I'm glad to see Democrats fighting back and trying to get attention on this. I mean, we should point out that this is not, the Texas Republicans didn't just think of this on their own. This was
No.
all about doing Trump's bidding. He called them, he demanded this. He said, I know we're going to lose the midterms. You have to basically eliminate all of the Democratic seats in Texas and gerrymander the state again. And of course, it already was gerrymandered, right? This was not fair elections for these congressional seats.
Right.
But you have to do it to completely deprive Democrats of any power, to give him an unfair advantage. And because each state does their own process, that could change the balance, right? It could make it very difficult for Democrats to even win the midterms, even if we win an overwhelming number of votes across the country. So it's incredibly dangerous, but I am delighted to see the Democrats in Texas standing up and saying, absolutely not. This was a special session that was supposed to be about the flooding that killed Texans, including little girls at summer camp. And instead of taking one step to try to protect Texans from this kind of devastating floods and weather, Republicans said, no, we're going to use this as an opportunity to steal more political power and rig the system in our favor. And to me, that is absolutely shameful. I was in the state assembly in Wisconsin during Act 10 when we had massive protests that involved hundreds of thousands of people week after week, month after month, to stop then Governor Scott Walker from destroying labor unions. And that was an incredible mobilization of people. And even though we were not able to stop the passage of that attack on unions, the mobilization that we were able to do in Wisconsin, which included our senators going to Illinois for a time, helped stop the tide of similar bills from passing in other states like Ohio. And so it is really, really important, I think, for those of us who are dismayed by what's happening in this country, to see folks taking action and say, yeah, they're standing up and fighting. Courage is contagious. And so we do need to see and applaud and support the actions of these brave Texans.
It's good to hear that. And I always say Illinois is always fully welcome to anybody that wants to come here. We're always happy to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about 2026. A lot of exciting things. You alluded to this in a previous question with the legislature. A lot of seats potentially open to being flipped next year, and that would be huge because Democrats have been working against some pretty unfair maps out in Wisconsin that has changed recently. So how are you feeling about the legislature's chances next year in the midterms? Do you think we're going to see that control in the legislature? Do you think you're going to flip a lot of seats like you just did in 24? How are you feeling?
I feel really optimistic. I think I've worked very, very hard. I've traveled the state throughout my career in the legislature, and we've never had the kind of energy and excitement and real chance of competitive maps. I think in the Senate, we are going to take the majority. I mean, we can take that to the bank. We have incredible candidates who are already hard at work, well over a year before the midterm elections, that are on the ground, that are well known in their districts, that have records of delivering for people. And I think we have a really good shot in the state assembly too. Now, those maps are tougher because those are Republican leaning maps. But when I see the energy and the anger that people are feeling at the Republican regime and their actions and their complete betrayal of families' economics struggles, I think we could have a huge Democratic wave in the midterms. And that will help us retain a Democratic governor and flip seats in the Senate and potentially win the Assembly too. Now, I do think it's really important that we retain the Attorney General's office because we cannot risk having a Republican Attorney General in our state, leaving our state totally unprotected during the last 2 years of a Trump presidency.
I mean, it's one bad attorney general that I'm not completely familiar with Wisconsin politics, but in my time that I've been there, I know Bad Brad was there as attorney general.
But thank goodness we've had good Josh for six
Yeah,
years,
good
and
Josh.
Josh has been a really strong attorney general, and my hope is that he will run again and help us retain that seat because we desperately need a strong attorney general in Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, here's another big story that just came out a few weeks ago in Wisconsin, which I know you definitely have heard of, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So Governor Tony Evers announced that he would not be running for a third term. Now, this personally, I thought was a little surprising. I thought he would be running. But when I was covering this a few weeks ago in one of my episodes, I noted that his decision to not run tells me that I think at least he feels pretty confident about Democrats' chances next year. So I have another question about that. But first, I just want to get your reaction to Governor Evers deciding not to run because he has quite a record. He's done a lot for the state. What are your thoughts on his decision?
Well, I think you read the situation right. I mean, I think the governor feels an incredible sense of responsibility to this state, and I think he understands that the bench is strong and Wisconsin is in good hands, thanks in large part to the efforts and his success over the last 6 years. And of course, he still has, almost 2 years to go in his governorship. So I'm really grateful to him for his service and his family, because it is a sacrifice for family, not just for his time as governor, but he has served the state for 5 decades as a teacher, as a principal, as an educational leader, and then finally as governor. And we're very lucky to have him.
Well, his decision to not run has opened up a pretty nice opening on both sides. We are seeing a very vibrant primary on both sides. I don't know if the other side is necessarily we want to call it vibrant. There are a few crazy people out there, but on the Democrat, yeah, we can call it dull crazies. But on the Democratic side, a lot of names are getting floated. Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez already announced that she's running. Sarah Godlewski is being floated. Josh Kaul is also being floated. And another name that is being floated is yours. You ran for governor a few years back, and so a lot of people remember that. And a lot of people have been asking me, I told people that I was going to interview you, and some folks asked me, and I have to ask you this, and I feel like you knew this was coming, but I have to ask you this question. Are you running for governor next year?
I am strongly considering it, and I'm quite likely to run and join the race for governor. When I ran in 2018, I had been a 2-term assemblywoman, but I'd been out of politics for 6 years, right? And I was so upset about Trump's ascension, his election in 2016. I knew that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. I had a background in reproductive rights, and I was pretty upset that there was over a dozen candidates that were running. The vast majority of them were men that had little to no experience in state government. And the one prominent woman who was running was not pro-choice. And I just said, this is not acceptable. And so even though I had just had a baby, my second child, I had a toddler and a newborn, I said,
Wow.
We need to be talking about what's happening federally and what is going to happen to the rights of women and girls in the state when Roe v. Wade is overturned, because Wisconsin, of course, still has this 1849 abortion ban that I tried to repeal when I was in the state assembly and, couldn't get Democrats fired up about at that point because people thought Roe was secure and the law of the land. And I ended up, finishing in the very top tier in that race, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But, since then, I've obviously served in the state Senate for the last 5 years and worked very, very hard to help flip the Supreme Court, elect Democrats statewide. And I think the opportunities are really, really exciting. It's going to be a wide open primary. There's not a clear front runner, but I'm certainly of the great people whose names are being floated. And I should say Sarah Godlewski has said she's not going to be running for governor.
Oh.
Um,
That I did not know about. Thank you for noting that.
yeah, she's thinking about running for lieutenant governor, but we'll see because she'll have to give up her appointed position if she does that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be great. We have a strong bench, but of that field, I certainly have the most experience in state government, and as well as obviously a lot of private sector experience running a small business and a nonprofit. And I think people are ready to have some inspirational and hopeful leadership at this time, making sure that who we elect as our next governor is someone who actually has a record of delivering success. And I certainly have that. I'm excited to share my record of accomplishments with voters of the state and hear their ideas.
Well, that's really exciting. Obviously, like you're gonna take your time to enter into that because it is a huge undertaking to run for a statewide office like that. But do you have any idea of like when we might expect a formal announcement or anything like that? Or are you still like in the deciding stages of all of that?
Well, it is a big undertaking, and so I want everything to I want to really give it the time and thought that it
Hmm.
deserves, and especially as it relates to my family,
Yeah.
because the folks who are considering running, a number of us have young kids, and I think there is nobody needs a 13-month primary, and folks are really not paying attention, other than you, obviously, and your listeners. But
Yeah.
the vast majority of Wisconsinites are not going to be even included into this race until next year. Um,
Hmm.
I think I don't feel a huge amount of time pressure. I still have a lot of work that I'm doing every day in the legislature. I'm introducing bills every week. And so, certainly in the coming weeks and months, I will be making a formal decision and announcement at that point. But uh, until then, my plate is full. And I've really been enjoying the many conversations that I've been having in recent weeks with folks from all over the state who are urging me to run, have ideas for me, and sharing their excitement and their enthusiasm.
Very cool. Very exciting stuff. Well, Senator Royce, we are almost out of time for our interview today. But before I do let you go, do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with my audience before we do conclude here?
Well, I think this is a very difficult time for our country, and I think it is important that we have some historical context, right? This country has faced really difficult challenges before, and has overcome them and moved forward. And I firmly believe that we can do that again. Uh, in Wisconsin, we have this incredible opportunity to elect someone and elect a Democratic trifecta that can actually get real results for people, that can lower costs for families on the most important items. But we also need to make sure that we are electing leaders that are not afraid to stand up to the bullies and the billionaires that are running this country into the ground. Um, and that's something that I've never been shy about. And I really appreciate the work that you are doing, and your audience members are doing to reach out to folks, because politics isn't really a hobby for most people,
Yeah.
but it really does affect people's lives. And I think it is really important for those of us who care about it and follow it every day to reach people in our lives who might not necessarily be paying attention every day to the news, because it's depressing, it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, it's exhausting, right? People are just trying to live their lives. They're trying to go to work, go to school, take care of their families. Um, and so really appreciate the fact that you are reaching people in different ways, and I'm here to help, and almost out of iced coffee myself.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Royce. I really do appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to keep doing this work. The mission of the show is to make it more accessible to people. That's why I love having folks like yourself on, bringing, elected officials directly to people, to my younger audience primarily. Well, Senator Royce, we thank you so much for joining us here today on the Ishan As Show. It was an honor to have you on, and I'm so excited. For all the things ahead for you. I think there's a lot. We hope to have you back on. Hope to have you back on soon.
I love that. And folks can certainly follow me on social media. Kelda Roys is, I'm the only Kelda Roy, so it's easy to find. But I always love to
Perfect.
get feedback from people.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, that was my interview with State Senator Kelda Roys, who shared that she is very likely to join the governor's race in Wisconsin. Very exciting stuff. And that is our episode for today. If you liked my commentary, then why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my Substack? It's a great way to stay in touch with the show. I like to post full versions of interviews, including the one we had today, on the Substack. I also like to post breaking news posts as well from there. So add your name to my email list so you can get my messages sent directly to your inbox. If you want to stay in touch with the show on social media, then follow us on Instagram at The Ishan S Show. And you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Real Ishan Shrivastava. And you can find me on Blue Sky at ishanshrivastava.bluesky.social. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much to Senator Roys for joining us for our interview today. Tune in on Saturday for my interview with Patrick Hanley, candidate for State Senate. It's a very great conversation that I just wrapped up before recording this. You don't want to miss it, and keep your eye on all the news and headlines that are coming out of Texas. It's a lot of stuff that's going on, so please continue to pay attention to everything. But thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.